it's the first disease that's been hyper politicized.
Yes, which is
insane.
Yeah, which is unfortunate because
I just read something where it said like a record high 16% of Americans don't trust the vaccine or something like that because of the politics.
Well, you know, so it's interesting because when I worked in covert influence, you know, there was a lot of thought put into messaging, right? So when the epidemic was going, or when the pandemic was going on or is going on, like what bothered me the most was the messaging. Like every country had different messaging, and then some of the messaging was terrifying, and some of it was not at all help, like was like ignoring the fact that anything was going on at all. And I'm like, where is the messaging that like science is working on it? You know, we don't have definitive answers. We think this is happening. You know, there just wasn't a lot of, you know, it's hard when like statements are put out there like you must wear a mask and you must be 6 feet apart and this is what's going to save you, when that's not actually scientifically accurate. They think at this moment that those things will be helpful and that those things will mitigate you getting it or how sick you get if you do get it. Right. Like it just wasn't, I feel like it wasn't caveated enough. Like there wasn't enough information around it. They were trying to do these sound bites that aren't really accurate. And then now, you know, now that all people are being vaccinated, you see more and more people getting confused about, do I wear a mask or do I not wear a mask? Right. Like I've been vaccinated, but I had COVID. Like, do we both have the same antibodies? Like, are we
still don't wear masks? Like, what?
Yeah. And because there's no clear, like what, you know, when all the lockdowns were happening, I'm like, what is the expectation for these lockdowns? Because I thought it became clear pretty quickly that a realistic expectation for any of the lockdowns was not eradication. New Zealand was the only one that was like, we're going to lock down fully and we're going to eradicate. But sorry for New Zealand, you are part of the rest of the world. So even if you've eradicated it on your island, like the real goal there is to eradicate until there's a vaccine and we can get our our population vaccinated, and then we can open. Like that's a more realistic goal, right? Like the real goal for the lockdowns was to not overwhelm the hospitals. It was not so that nobody got sick. Like that was never, like people not catching coronavirus, people not getting COVID is not actually a realistic goal. Our hospital systems not being overwhelmed so that people who would normally be able to get proper care cannot and die like unnecessarily. Like that's a goal, right? Like that, but it was never being said. I'm like, that seems to be the clear purpose. We're just trying not to overwhelm the hospitals, but nobody's saying it. So now there's like mask shaming and there's all this confusion about, you know, when are we going to end the lockdown, and all this criticism about, they ended the lockdown too early, not early enough. Like, you know, it wasn't clear.
I saw something really funny. I think it was on Vice yesterday where there's a group of anti-maskers who are now going to start wearing masks to protect themselves against vaccinated people.
I read an article about some
that was hilarious
private school superintendent who is telling the teachers that they couldn't come back if they were vaccinated because they would be a risk. Like, I just don't I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, who knows? It's hard. That's the problem with all of it, with everything, with all of this tribalism and the political climate. It's impossible to understand to know what's real or what's not.
And science is slow, right? Like science is working on it. It is slow. Like I've heard a lot of people say, you know, I don't want to get vaccinated now because we're still in the clinical trials. I get that.
Yeah, totally. Like, I can totally empathize with that, especially if somebody's pregnant and they don't want, I can totally empathize with a mother that's pregnant and doesn't want to get the vaccine because they don't know how it'll affect their child.
Exactly. Or if you have like an immune disorder or something, right? Like you don't want to chance it, right? You don't know what's going to happen. I get that. I think as long as we're all being honest, like, you know, I think as long as people are aware, like, be honest that, like, the vaccines are in clinical trials right now. Like, everybody's being vaccinated as part of this giant clinical trial, right? Like, we're not going to know for a long time any repercussions. We're not going to know for a long time if we need boosters or how long these vaccines are going to work. We're not going to, I mean, there's tons of stuff we don't know. because science is working on it. We just have to be patient and try to keep up with updates. Like if you try to force the hand of a scientist to give you a direct answer, like give me, tell me exactly what's happening, this is the one and final answer. They can't do that.
Right.
And if they do that, then that should be a huge red flag to you that whatever they're saying is not accurate.
Right. Scientists shouldn't try to act like they have the answers to everything. Their goal is to ask questions, not to.
Exactly. Like they should be telling you, we know this now. We think this now.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the extent of it.
Right.
And you have to be open.
Another weird thing about the vaccines is a really good friend of mine had cancer when he was a child,
mm-hmm.
and he had like ungodly amounts of radiation and chemo.
Wow.
And it affected his body quite strangely. Like there's certain things that really fuck him up. Like if he has a beer, he's hung over the next day for like the whole day.
Wow.
And like different little quirky things with him. And when I had my first kid, he went and got a Tdap shot.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's nice of him.
Yeah, it was very nice of him. He's a super nice guy. And because he wanted to hang out with us, and he loves kids, so he wanted to hang out with the kid. And the Tdap shot literally had him like in horrific night sweats for like 24 hours.
Oh my gosh.
He was like, he could barely eat, he could barely breathe. He thought he was going to die after he got that shot.
Wow.
And he just got the COVID vaccine, and he said nothing.
Really?
So it's interesting how different vaccines or different whatever, how they affect the body in different ways depending on who you are. And just like the same thing with the different viruses, like the way Andy caught dengue and it affected him like that. My wife had coronavirus. She got it. She was like deathly ill for 10 days.
Wow.
And I was around her the whole time, like helping her and doing everything. I never got it. I never even caught it.
I didn't catch it either. I was right there with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. It's one of the things, like, you never know how the virus is going to affect you. You never know how the vaccine is going to affect you. I find biology to be like this super inaccurate science because there's so many factors.
Right.
Like your body's history, like your current state of health. I mean, you can't guess. I mean, you can kind of guess. Like, that's how I feel about birth control, right? Like you're trying to change your biology. There's tons of different types of birth control. You have no idea what any one of those are going to do to your body.
Right.
So you just guess, and you kind of keep fingering, hope for the best.
Right.
So, yeah.